In today's episode, we're going to talk about tithing. What is it all about? Where does it go? And do we have to do it? Welcome to Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. Today I'm here with my friend Henrique Gomes. How are you?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm really excited to be interviewing
me
you.
too.
Yeah, so tell us about tithing. What is tithing all about?
Well, tithing is a biblical concept. It's not a man-made concept. It was God's concept. It's when God asked His people to return. You see that I'm saying return, right? I'm not saying giving. We don't pay tithe. We don't give tithe. We return tithing. Because if we have the concept of God giving us 100%, He's only asking for 10% back. And it's not because God needs money to run His operation here on earth. He's asking 10% back for our benefit, for our faith to grow, for our dependence on Him to grow. Sometimes giving tithe is easy, sometimes it's not. But when we give back to God, we feel a lot more connected to Him in a way.
So tithing during biblical times didn't even have to do with money?
Oh no! Sometimes it was like your first fruits or your sheep or your cattle. It didn't matter. God just wanted you to return something to Him.
Wow. So nowadays, when we look at our churches, our tithing system is based on money. So where does this money even go?
Well, this money, it's at least on the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's a bit different than some other religions, but the money that you put on a plate offering, that money goes to the conference. The conferences use that to pay, some parts of it to pay for the pastors. Parts of it goes to the union, and the union goes to the division, and division goes to general conference, and part of that money comes back to the conference. So this way, every single church in the country, in the division, and in the world, in certain way, they are being supported by your tithe in specifically. It's different from other churches because some other churches, whatever tithe gives, it goes exclusively to that church. So the pastor is being paid with that money. Operations is happening with that money. Now, the problem with that is that pastors might just want to grow the membership, to have more of that tithe. Now, in the Adventist church, our goal is not much grow a church, but grow the message, spread the message everywhere. So if a church only has 5-10 people, they still might have a pastor that will cater to that church. And a church that has 300 people will also have pastors to cater to that church.
Yeah, that's powerful. So tithing has more to do with being able to support the spread of the gospel.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, if you see with the people of Israel, God asked them to give the tithe to support the Levites. And they were the priests, in this case. The main reason why God asked those things, and one of the reasons, right, was so they didn't have to work anywhere else. Their work was to keep the temple, cater to the people of Israel, do the sacrifice. This was their work. And God didn't want them to do anything else. They wanted to focus on that. Same thing with the pastors today. You don't want to have a pastor that has a part-time job doing DoorDash or delivering pizza or something like this because they need to pay for, rent or whatever. So the church is supporting that pastor so the pastor can cater to the members of the church and visit people in hospitals and prepare sermons and just deal with those things without thinking about the financial side of it.
That's really powerful. I love that system that exists in order to support the spread of the gospel. Now, it seems tithing is simple and obvious for a person who has a job, but how about someone like a kid? Do children need a tithe?
Oh, definitely. I think you should start tithing the first time you get a quarter. It doesn't matter how much it is. We see in the Bible there's the widow that gave 2 little half a pennies or something, give a little bit. It does not matter. God is not asking you to give a specific amount of money. He's asking you to give 10% of what you have. So whatever you earn, that's what you give. Because we got to understand that, God does not care about money. he could care less about it. He doesn't care how much money you have. He does not care. He cares about your salvation. So when he asks for money, he's asking for you to be faithful to him. That's what he wants. See, money comes and goes, right? I remember when I was a kid, I was growing up in Brazil. You see my accent, right? You can see that I'm from the south, right?
Yeah,
like way
sure.
south, right? Way south. So growing up in Brazil, I remember that there was a change in currency at one time in my lifetime. And I remember that there were some people after the currency change that they had saved a lot of money in their mattress, that pretty soon they forgot about it. And then when they took those out and they took to the bank said, I'm sorry, this is worth nothing. Okay, this was money, right? Money means nothing. So God does not care if you give him money, but he cares about your heart. He cares how you give. That's why God says, we like a cheerful giver. You not only giving, but you're giving happy. And the same time that Jesus was talking about the widower that was giving little pennies, there's the other, the Pharisees, they were putting bags of money. But Jesus did not talk about the bags of money. He talked about the little one because her heart was in the right place.
Yeah, she gave more than anyone else.
Exactly. So he doesn't care how much you give or if you give tithe, but he cares about your heart. So if money is so important to you that you cannot spare to return 10% to God, your money is not in God. Your heart is not in God. Your heart is in the money.
It becomes an idol.
It becomes an idol.
So, this is really nice in theory, to want to display my faith in God, want to grow my relationship. But when we start talking about a practical level, 10% is a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
For the person who is struggling to get by, separating that amount does not seem logical. What should a person do if they realize, I can't really give? Will God be all right with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to think for example, if you look at my 10%, right, you might look at it and say, oh, that's nothing. That's change, right? But some people, they'll look and say, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. There's a difference. God is asking everybody for 10%. There's not a tax bracket because it's not tax, right? It's 10% for everyone. And again, it goes back to your heart. So if somebody right now it's struggling and saying, hey, I really feel I should give tithes, but I'm not sure if I can survive, right? The only thing I can say is that you will. It's amazing the math that God does in our lives. Sometimes it makes no sense. You might go through trouble. You definitely will, okay? Because God will make sure that your faith is growing and your trust in him is growing. You might have troubles, but in the end, God will see you through those things. And it doesn't matter how much it is. Okay, I remember going to school when I was in college. My whole monthly salary that I had in school, because I was owing the school, so they would take most of the money to pay tuition. I would get about $60 a month. That was it. So for a college student, every time I got $60, man, I want to eat. I want to, you see, I like to eat, right? So I want to eat. I want to go do something. I need to buy groceries. I need to buy soap, deodorant, all that stuff, right?
The basics.
The basics, right? $60. This is what I have for the whole month. And, to give to God $6, it was hard. It was really hard. And I tell you, most of the times, I didn't. I just said, God, you understand that I'm not making a lot of money. Wait until I get more money, and then I'll give you tithe. All right?
Yeah.
This was my logic. But the Bible is clear on that. It says, if you're faithful in the little, you be faithful in the much. Okay. God is just saying, it doesn't matter how much you earn. He doesn't care about the dollar sign. He cares about the heart. So I remember just, skipping it and didn't care much about it. And my life was beautiful. God was still blessing me. It's not like God was punishing me day after day because of that. But he knew that my heart was in the right place. So I remember one day I went canvassing, which is, selling books door to door. And when I came back, that year I had made very good money. I made about $5,000. And I had all that money to pay my tuition. And when I got back, it was a Friday. On Sabbath, I went to church, and they were talking on Sabbath school about tithing. That specific trimester, quarter. And I remember that I don't even know what the person said because I didn't pay attention. But I remember God telling my heart, like, you need to tithe. And I said, okay, I'll tithe, no problem. Like a very strong conviction. And I said, no problem, right? But then on Sunday was registration. And then when I came to registration, finished everything, and when I got through the financial part, I put the money minus the tithe, and I ended up seeing that I needed exactly what I had for tithe, $500, to be able to register for school. Now I was an international student, okay? So to me, not being able to pay my school goes a little bit beyond I'm gonna have to go back to my mom's home, because the problem is that my home would be in a different country, and having to go back and losing this opportunity. And I just didn't want to do this, and it's not easy for you just to take a break in one semester.
So this would affect your visa.
Everything, like my whole life right there would just stop. And I would have to lose all this opportunity. And if I went to Brazil, I wouldn't be able to continue my education there. So it was just crazy. So what I did was that I prayed and I said, I didn't give the tithe. I held it in my account. And then I started bargaining with God. I said, God, you know what? I know that I need to tithe, but I need that money to pay school. And you know that I need that money to pay school. So whenever I come out of school or whenever I get some extra money, I'll just pay this. I'll make sure I'll mark it down and I not forget.
You're making a deal.
I was making a deal with God, Hey, give me a discount on the tithe, all right? But, again, my mind was in the money, not my heart. So it took a little while to understand that. And I remember that I prayed about it. I just held it because I had 1 week to pay that money. So I said, if I have a week, let me pray for a week about this. And I remember praying and just suffering. Like, my heart was broken because I had to make the decision. Because I felt the conviction, but at the same time, I knew that would mean something extraordinary for my life. And I remember going to a professor, Bill Kilgore at Southwestern, and I asked him, Professor, I'm having this issue. And he told me, Henry, if God put something in your heart to do, if He had a conviction in your heart, you have to do it. Because otherwise, for the rest of your life, you're going to keep thinking, why didn't I do it? And then he said, any word about money? And he told me, just remember what Ellen White said. She said, God has 1,000 ways to provide in which we know nothing. And he even explained, he said, you see, think about it. We think about 1,000 ways. God has more ways than what we have thought. So the ways you thought that God could solve a problem, He has even more. And I was like, okay, I didn't have any way that I could think of coming out of this other than robbing a bank or, doing something stupid like this. So I kept suffering, praying. I would wake up in the middle of the night and then just pray, what do I do, God? And I had until Sunday to pay. And then Sabbath came in. And that was the day. Because if I wanted to give my tithe, that was on Sabbath. And I remember going to church and I wrote a check. And I remember I held the check and I sat right on the back because I wanted the deacons to take a long time to get to me,
so
right?
You can run out.
Yes, last minute, last dash, I was holding it and my heart was broken. And I remember when the plate passed and I put the tithe in there, and it was such a mixed feeling because I was both afraid and extremely joyful. Joyful because I did God's will for my life, right? I did what He told me in my heart that I should do. But I was afraid because I knew the consequences that I was going to have to suffer. And I said, God, if you did this, it's your will. And I remember I just went back home. I didn't want to eat. I just, fasted, because food did not taste good back, at that time. But it was the afternoon. My mom called me. She was in Richmond, Virginia. And she said, I got a good news for you. And she said, the church here, they did a special offering because she asked for prayer, for my son, because my mom couldn't help me, bless her heart, she couldn't help me. So she asked the church to pray for me. And the church said, hey, let's do a little bit more. Let's do a little offering and see if we can send something. So she said, hey, we did an offer. We got $250 for you. And I said, praise God, we already have half. I said, God has 1,000 ways to provide. He already going to do it, right? So I remember on Sunday, I woke up like, an ungodly hour, like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, to pray a little bit more. And when they opened the ad building, I went there to talk to my financial advisor. And I had a big smile, and I said, hey, you won't believe, God already blessed. I already have 50%, and I'm sure until the end of the day, I'll have 100%. And he said, Henry, don't worry. On Friday, we met, and it's a bit emotional to me, because you remember. And she said, on Friday, we met, and we decided to give you $500 for you to pay for your tuition. So you don't have to worry about it. So the $500 I need became $750. God was abundant. He gave more than what I needed. He gave more than what I had put up, because he didn't care about the money. He cared about my heart. And my heart at that time was just completely changed, because tithe to me became something a lot bigger than a dollar sign. And I realized right there that God, man, he could do anything in this world. He could just put $1 million in my account overnight. But he didn't want that, because that would not bring me salvation. He does not care about the money of all the problems I'm going through. He cares about, am I being saved or not? So everything that happens in my life, it's to help me walk towards salvation. It's for him, to walk towards him, to be saved, to be with him one day. And money cannot have a part in my heart, because we cannot serve two masters. We cannot serve money and God at the same time. And to me right there was like, what? My school, I don't care about it. If I don't have money, it's God's way, right? Before I had gone to school, I had asked God, because I didn't want to be a pastor. I didn't want to do theology. And I said, God, if I go, we got to do a few things. I was, telling God what to do. How stupid we are when we're young, right? So I told him, I want you to help me with my insecurities, with my problems, speaking in public, that I had. And one more important thing, I want you to pay the bill, because I had no money to do. And God, God did bless, and every other way after that, if I got $10 from someone, $1 was automatically taken out from it. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't something that I had to struggle with, And I remember after I graduated, I worked for a little while at 3ABN, and the salary wasn't good, but the work was fun. And I remember, I would pay my bills and all of that. And I remember once, a banker came and called me and said, hey, let me do a little financial analysis to you and all of that. And then she started asking me, tell me your bills. And then I told all my bills, and she said, tell me your paychecks. And I told all my paychecks, and she looked at me and said, you need a second job. And I was like, why? And because the amount was negative. Because I told her, the first thing, one thing that happened was that I stopped putting the tithe in the bottom of my calculations and put it the first one, So first thing I do when I earn any money is take the tithe, and then I pay everything else. For some reason, God made a miraculous calculation, and my negative always every month became positive. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I don't need to understand how God makes miracles. I just know that it happened every single month. Wow. So tithe is in your heart. It's for your heart. It's for your salvation. It's not about money. Now, when I talk about tithing, I talk about money, people will start saying, hey, Judas, right? Judas, just think about money. No, it's not about money. The church needs money. Yes, they need money. But if you give tithes or not, God's still going to do the work. He says that if you don't speak, the rocks will cry out, right? He doesn't need pastors. He doesn't need anybody. He can put anybody else. He can put, just donkeys to speak if he needs to. But he wants to work with people, and he wants to work people's heart. And throughout my life, after that experience, I've seen so many people struggling with tithe. And every time I talk to them, I try to explain to them that, look at where your heart is. And it might be hard. It might be a big sacrifice. But God is not. He's not asking you to do the impossible. He's saying, just do what I told you to do, and I will do the impossible. I'll make sure that you have enough. I'll make sure that you provide it. I'll make sure that you're gonna have abundance in your life. Because if we trust him, if we put our lives completely on his hands, That's what he's going to do for us.
Man, Enrique, that's super powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony. It's so clear that God is faithful. And it's so clear that your faith has grown since that moment. You're describing now tithing isn't even a question.
No.
It just happens naturally. I'm curious to know, what do you think your life would be like if you never took that leap of faith?
I would still be struggling, because we're always thinking that I don't have enough. Because if money is your priority in this world, you're never gonna have enough. Okay, you can look at Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, or whatever, you think, oh, they have a lot. I would be so happy if I had a lot of money. You wouldn't, because those guys are thinking, how can I make more? How can I have more? People are always trying to do more and get more, always have. And once you say, I don't want to have anything other than Jesus in my life, and once you do that, your life becomes fulfilled. And you become fulfilled. And the little you have not only goes further, but God will bless you. And the little that you have will become enough for you, for your family. I remember, thinking about marriage. I didn't think I could get married because I was so poor. I could barely afford to live myself. I had to have roommates, like 3-4 people. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to rent a house. And I was like, how am I going to have a wife and not have 4 other people living in my house? And then I said, God, it's not about the money. It's about trusting you. So got married, and it happens. The little money you have, it multiplies. It's like the loaves and the fishes, right? God can do the same thing for your money. And money, it's nothing more than the blessings of your work. So you work, you make money, and that's how you survive. God knows about it. He doesn't care about the money. Monetary does not matter for God, but he wants to know that what your work, what you do, you're returning to him part of that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I'm curious to know what your thought is for the person who is convicted to tithe, the person who is convicted to give back to God what already belongs to him, but they say, I don't think my church deserves it. What if they say,
good question.
What if they say, yeah, I want to just give it to this organization out there. I just want to throw it over here instead. What should they do?
I went through a phase like this. I thought about it before. So for example, you look at sometimes your church and they are misusing the money, right? They are doing something you don't agree. They're spending an absurd amount of money on new carpet. And you're like, oh man, the tithe I'm giving, whatever, first of all, the money of tithe you give doesn't go to change carpets, doesn't go to buy new sound systems. Those are offerings that you give out of your heart, those are offerings. The tithe goes for different things. So we have to understand that. And second, God is not asking you to be, the accountant for him. He's not asking you to make sure that the money is going to the right place, to the right amount, they're making the right thing. Make sure you do, you're always checking and seeing what they're doing. If they're doing wrong, don't give it to them. No, it's not. He's just saying give. Because it goes back to that God does not matter about money. That does not care about money. So if you're giving your tithe to a church and a church is misusing it, God will deal with that church. Is the work of the God, if the work of God is going to continue? Yes, it will. The gospel's still going to be preached. God will deal with each individual person individually. He's not going to, so it's not your job to judge it. Your job is just to be faithful and to return.
There's things outside of our control.
Exactly. Yeah, well, I remember growing up and there was a big scandal, there was one treasurer in the church that was stealing money and a lot of people stopped giving tithes. And it was just insane. Like, why would you stop giving tithes just because it's God's going to deal with that person. Your job is not to be, the judge of anything. Your job is just to be faithful.
Wow. And I'd love to know, Henry, to start concluding, how can someone grow in their faith?
Grow in their faith, it's always getting closer to God in the little things, And I think the most important is to look at yourself. What are the things, what are the things that run your life, right? we all have idols sometimes, right? We look at things, we want to do things, we focus on things. So we need to look at all those things and say, are those things taking precedent of my relationship with Jesus? And that includes money. You know, it's money being more important to me than my relationship with Jesus. So I'm not giving tithe right now. Why? Why I'm not giving? What's the reason? Oh, I don't make enough. Is that an excuse? Most of the time it's going to be no, you know. And if you do this, if you work little by little, your faith with God will grow, because your faith will only grow once you depend on God 100%. So if you're depending on Him 90%, it's not going to work out, you know. When you depend on Him 100%, your faith grows, and your relationship with Him grows, and things, you know, get better, you know, after that.
Henrique, thank you so much for sharing your testimony, your wisdom on the topic. I know this is going to touch someone. And yeah, all I can say is thank you. And we share with you at this moment, maybe you're struggling with making the decision to tithe. We want to encourage you to do so, but also remember that God is looking not for a dollar sign, but for your heart. He wants to see your faithfulness, and He wants to be faithful back to you. We want to thank you for joining us at Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. We'll see you again very soon. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. If you want to watch some more content, boom, look at these. There's a video up here, there's a video down here.